Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Immigration Fridays. I'm your host, as always, Prashanthi Reddy, and we're going to break down one complex immigration topic and just make it easy to understand. Today, we're going to talk about the H-1B transfer. Whether you're considering a new job opportunity, your company is changing, or you simply want to understand your options for some future course of action, it's important to know the ins and outs of a H-1B transfer. We'll talk about underlying guidelines, step-by-step processes, and most importantly, share some expert tips to ensure that you have a smooth transition should you decide to file a H-1B transfer. So let's first talk about what a H-1B transfer is. A H-1B transfer is when you're presently on a H-1 and you want to move to a different company. You would file a H-1B transfer petition, and once it is approved, you will be able to work at that company. Sometimes, even when it's pending, you'll be able to work at that new company. So let's look into that further. The good news, of course, with the H-1B transfer petition is that generally it's exempt from the annual H-1B cap lottery process. This is because the person was already counted towards the lottery in the past, so you don't have to again register for the lottery. This is, of course, a significant advantage because you can file for a H-1B transfer at any time, whether or not the H-1B numbers are available for that year. Now let's talk about a few key guidelines in order to file your H-1B transfer in 2025. Firstly, you have to have a valid H-1B status. So if you're currently holding a H-1B status at the time of filing a petition, only then transferring is possible. You have to have been lawfully admitted when you last entered, which means that you have to have an I-94. You should not have violated the terms and conditions of your H-1B status, which you presently have. You should file in a timely manner before the expiry of your previous H-1B status. However, in some instances, there are grace periods. There is a 60-day grace period whereby you can wait for a period of 60 days. And within 60 days, you have to file for the transfer, even if you are laid off. So from the date of layoff or from the date that you resigned, whatever it might be, you have 60 days to file another H-1B transfer. Of course, the employer has to be eligible. The employer must be qualified as a US employer and meet all the requirements of the H-1B program. And last but not the least, the job has to qualify as a specialty occupation. That means the job should require at least a bachelor's degree in a specific field. Now let's talk about or understand the step-by-step process for filing a H-1B transfer. I know it can be daunting, but I'll break it down into straightforward and simple steps. First, of course, you have to have a job offer from a US employer who's willing to sponsor you for the H-1. Then you file a labor condition application. This is filed with the Labor Department. It's usually filed online. And this takes about 5 to 7 days to get approved. And in the LCA or the labor condition application, the employer puts the prevailing wage in there, and he puts in the offered wage, and it shows that he'll be paying higher or equivalent to the prevailing wage, and also the employer will show that he or she is not negatively impacting the working conditions of US workers. So there's some check boxes that have to be marked stating that. Your job is mentioned, if there's an incline, that's mentioned, your salary is mentioned, and your work location is mentioned. Once the DOL is reviewed and certified, then we move on to the next step, which is filing of the I-129 petition. Now, you include the approved LCA, the I-129 petition, all the forms that come under the umbrella of the I-129 petition. And then, of course, you submit a petitioner letter which shows information about the company, information about the beneficiary, their education, job description, how they qualify, etc., etc. In addition, you would also put in supporting documents such as proof of the person's status, their I-94, their pay stubs, H-1B approval, previous H-1B approval, their educational credentials to show that they qualify, and of course their passport. Please make sure that the passport has not expired. So once you file, you'll get a USCIS will send you a receipt that they have your case. Now, if you file it online, which you can, then you'll get this receipt instantly. So there is an advantage in filing online. If you file it by paper, by mail, then you'll get the receipt in about 10 business days. Now, USCIS will review your petition after sending the receipt, and they may send a request for further evidence if they need any further documentation or any further explanation, or they might send you an approval. And after the RFE, they could, of course, send a denial as well. So let's presume that it's approved. So once approved, you can then continue working for your employer or start working for your employer, whatever the situation might be. Now let's talk about a few tips so that your H-1B transfer will take place in a smooth manner. First of all, common sense says start early. If you're considering a job change, don't wait until the last minute because there are a lot of things that can happen to USCIS. Processing times are not within our control. The LCA takes about 5 to 7 business days. There might be documents that you will require which you realize that you don't have. So always start the process sooner rather than later. Talking about documentation, you have to make sure you have all the documentation from your previous employer or from your present employer in order to file the transfer to the new employer. You need your H-1B approval. Of course, you'll have your I-94 with you. You'll have your passport and any previous LCA approvals, or if you have a copy of the petition, great, because that way you can make sure that your W-2 or your pay stubs are showing the correct amount as per the LCA. And so you can preempt an RFE on that issue. Because they'll always, when you're filing a transfer, they'll always want to make sure that you're actually maintaining status before they approve the transfer request. Now, we talked a little bit about portability, which is what we said is that you will be able to start working for your new employer as soon as you get the receipt. Or actually as soon as the petition has been delivered by to USCIS, and this you can verify from FedEx or whatever mechanism you're using, whatever mail carrier system you're using. So once you confirm, you get a confirmation that the package has been delivered, the person can actually start working, and that's called portability. But you have to understand there are certain limitations to the portability. Number one, and most important in my mind, is the fact that suppose you move before your H1 is approved. If it gets approved, there's no issue. But if it gets denied, then you might have closed the doors to going back to your previous employer. They might have withdrawn your H1 and you might find yourself out of status. So that's a key factor to understand before you decide to move before you actually get the approval. I would suggest instead do premium processing so that you get the approval quickly and then you move. But let's talk a little bit about what are the conditions, preconditions for portability. First, you should have been lawfully admitted. You should have a valid I-94. You should be in valid H-1 status. You should not have any unauthorized employment. You should file your petition in a timely manner. And the petition should be a non-frivolous petition, meaning that a reasonable petition which has some basis in law and in fact. Next, be aware of any potential RFEs that you might get. If you do get an RFE, read it very, very carefully. Respond to the prompts thoroughly and with the help of your employer and their legal counsel, hopefully your RFE should be responded to properly and you should get an approval. Next, consider premium processing if you're doing a H-1B transfer. especially if you want to move immediately and you maybe don't want to use what we were discussing earlier, the portability rule, because of the disadvantages that we talked about. Then go for premium processing, and that way you'll be able to get your petition approved faster. This guarantees a decision within 30 days, but of course you have to pay the 2085, which is a large sum of money. So I would say weigh the pros and cons. And of course, last but not the least, seek expert legal advice. That's why we're here. Immigration laws can be complex, they can keep changing. It's recommended that both you and your prospective employer consult with an experienced immigration attorney so that they can guide you through the entire process and address any concerns that you might have. This is especially important if you have a complex situation. Now, many of you may have specific questions about your situations. While we can't provide personalized legal advice here in this forum, we encourage you to leave any questions that you might have in the comments below, and we'll do our best to address them in our Ask Prashanthi presentations, which we do every week. So please put your questions there and we'll be happy to answer them. As you all know, navigating the H-1B transfer process can be a big step. Still, by understanding the guidelines, the process, and by following these expert tips, you can significantly increase your chances of a successful transition to your next professional opportunity in the US. Remember, staying informed is key. Keep following Immigration Fridays for more updates and insights on various immigration topics. If you found this episode helpful, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more immigration content, and share it with anyone who you think might benefit from this information. Thank you for watching Immigration Fridays. Until next Friday, see you.